Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hello and welcome to the moment that you've all been waiting for, the Golden Pig Awards ceremony for Innistrad Midnight Hunt and the Innistrad Midnight Hunt Commander Precons. Throughout spoiler season, Commanders have been competing for this incredibly prestigious award. And although there are many worthy commanders, only one can hold the title of the Golden Pig of Innistrad Midnight Hunt. The winner of the Golden Pig Award, of course, receives a Golden Pig, which is most definitely made of pure gold and was most definitely not purchased from Amazon. This award will, of course, be cherished forever and displayed by the winner of the Golden Pig. Now, just a quick note before we start talking about the runners-up. These picks are 100% based off of my own opinions. I'm selecting my favorite picks from this set and Commander Precons based on their design, and your picks might be different, and that's okay. These are my picks based on which commanders are my favorite, not based on which are the most powerful. That's a completely different episode where I talk about the tier rankings for the commanders, and that will be coming out in the near future as well. And just one more thing before we jump into the episode, a big thank you to Eddie for all your help throughout spoiler season, and also to everyone else out there. If I make any mistakes in this episode or any other episode, make sure you blame Eddie. Or if you even just don't like my picks in this episode, make sure you blame Eddie. And with that said, let's jump into it. So let's get things started off at number 10. And coming in at 10th place, we've got Kyler Sigardian Emissary. Kyler is a 2/2 human cleric that costs 3 green-white. Kyler has, whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a ++1 counter on Kyler Sigardian Emissary. And other humans you control get ++1 for each counter on Kyler. So Kyler is kind of like a commander that is a Door to Destinies, but better, but specifically for humans. And by better, what I mean by that is that Door to Destinies counts cast spells, and this one counts when humans enter. So because of that, obviously, Kyler takes other things into consideration, like, humans entering by blinking, or tokens, etc, etc. So yeah, because of that, there are some really powerful things that you can do with this commander, and even though you just might be playing a humans deck, you can very easily win kind of out of nowhere with the level of power this commander can put out. So for players out there that want to utilize a lot of green and white humans for a human tribal deck, well, this might just be your commander. It's a very simple yet effective design. And of course, if you want to utilize a lot of low-to-the-ground humans, there are a lot of great options out there, including things like Eternal Witness, Grand Abolisher, and Azusa Lost But Seeking. Yeah, Eddie pointed out to me that in these colors, there are like 1,000 plus humans to choose from, so yeah, pick your favorites. Eternal Witness says when it enters the battlefield, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So obviously, if you utilize this in combination with something like a blink spell, like maybe a Cloud Shift, well, you can grow your army really quickly out of nowhere. I mean, this just does give you good generic value, but if you were to say, again, just blink this with a Cloud Shift, then get that Cloud Shift back, then blink again, then do that again and again and again, you can get a lot of counters on your commander and pump your team. And that's just one way that you can utilize this card. Next up, for a 2-mana human with Grand Abolisher, it does a lot of work for you. It says during your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. Basically, this protects you from your opponents doing anything on your turn other than, blocking in combat. So have fun with that. And of course, yes, even Azusa Lost But Seeking is a human as well, and you may play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. This can really help you get out to a fast start and to really keep things going when you draw into more cards and put more lands into play and cast even more spells, and yeah, you can get ahead really quick. And of course, with those lands, maybe you've got Maya Bredegar Protector in play as well. Maya herself is an anthem giving other creatures you control +1/+1, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. So yeah, obviously you're in green and you've got plenty of ways to get a lot of lands in play and make more and more humans to make your commander bigger, which makes your army bigger. Speaking of which, there's Increasing Devotion, which is going to create 5/1/1 white human creature tokens, and if it was cast from a graveyard, you get 10 instead. Again, just by casting this with your commander in play and nothing else, not even any counters on it already, you are getting an incredible amount of value. That's going to be 5 tokens in play, 5 counters on your commander, which again pumps your entire army, so now, yeah, those little tokens are now 6 6s. 5 mana for 30 power plus that power gain on your commander. Yeah, that's really good. And again, if you flash it back, even better. And speaking of better, Call the Copper Codes can be an absolute game ender in this deck. It has Strive, and it says choose any number of target opponents, create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens for X the number of creatures those opponents control. So yeah, at instant speed, you can get a human creature token for every single creature that your opponents control. If your opponents have 12 total creatures on the board, you get 12 humans, and again, that's going to trigger your commander 12 times, and now they're absolutely massive. And if you got a way to give your creatures trample or evasion, you're going to be able to finish out the game pretty quickly from there. So yeah, again, although Kyler is a very straightforward commander, it can also be a very impactful one. It really might surprise you just how many powerful humans are out there in these colors. And again, you also might surprise your opponents with how quickly you can finish out the game. So again, congratulations to Kyler for placing 10th place in the Golden Pig Awards. But now let's move away from 10th place and on to 9th place. And coming in at 9th place, we've got Leer, Forgotten Archangel. She's a 4/5 angel with flying and lifelink that costs 2 white, black. She has, whenever another non-token creature you control dies, return that card to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. And if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. So this commander can do a lot of work for you and can be built in a lot of interesting ways too. Being able to repeatedly get back your non-token creatures that die is a big deal. And with just a little setup, this commander can provide you an absurd amount of value. Again, while at the same time, really throwing a wrench into some of your opponent's plans by making it so that their creatures, when they die, get exiled. And again, this says exile it instead, so your opponents aren't getting any death triggers. So if an opponent has an aristocrat-style deck or a graveyard-centric deck, they're going to be in big trouble when your commander's in play. That's just a nice added bonus for what this commander wants to do. Now, obviously, one of the ways that you can build around this commander is with a Shadowborn Apostle build. Shadowborn Apostle is a 1/1 human cleric that says a deck can have any number of cards named Shadowborn Apostle, and by paying a black, you sacrifice 6 creatures named Shadowborn Apostle and search your library for a demon creature card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Essentially, play with a ton of these in your deck, get a lot of them in play, sacrifice them, and get some incredibly powerful demons in play like Razaket the Foul-Blooded, which also lets you sacrifice creatures, but in this case, you can tutor to go get anything. Regardless, with your commander in play, instead of those Shadowborn Apostles getting into your graveyard and getting stuck there, they're coming back to your hand at the beginning of every end step that you do this. And of course, you can take even more advantage of this with something like Cryptic Gateway. It makes you tap 2 untapped creatures you control and put a creature card from your hand into play that shares a creature type with each creature tapped this way. So basically get a lot of Shadowborn Apostles in play, sacrifice some of them, and then tap the other ones to get more in play, and then you tap those to get more in play, and you see where this is going. Regardless, outside of a Shadowborn Apostles build, there are a lot of other options. And a different one and a really unique one might be a Flash Tribal deck. So you can run creatures like Black Lance Paragon that have Flash, so you can cast them whenever you want. Again, whenever they die, they're coming back to your hand at the beginning of the end step, so you can then just cast them on your opponent's turns. And of course, you can get even more value out of those creatures by sacrificing them yourselves with something like Viscera. And obviously, the more and more death triggers you have in play, the more value you're gonna get. You can also utilize cards like Bantu's Monument that reduce the cost of your creatures too. It says, black creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So now you can more easily cast your flash creatures and drain your opponents while you're doing so. Again, Leer can be built in a lot of interesting ways, and on top of that, again, she can hose certain strategies that your opponents might have. See, I definitely like this design, and I definitely think that Leer has earned her spot in the Golden Pig Awards at number 9. And now let's move 1 spot further into our rankings from number 9 to number 8. And coming in at 8th place, we've got what might be the weirdest name in Magic history with Old Stick Fingers. Yep, that's a name. Anyways, Old Stick Fingers is a star horror that costs X black green. It says, when you cast this spell, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X creature cards. Put all creature cards revealed this way into your graveyard, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Old Stick Fingers' power and toughness are each equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Now, this is a very unique design, and there are some incredibly powerful things that you can do with it. And when I say powerful, I also mean broken. Now, obviously you can build this commander in a couple of different directions, and I'll talk about some of those, but yeah, one of these ways is most definitely combo. By limiting the number of creatures in this deck to a very small amount, you can essentially just guarantee that when you cast this, you're always going to hit those creature cards and they're going to go right in your graveyard. So for example, maybe in your deck you only run 2 creatures, and those are Mikaeus the Unhallowed and Triskelion. This is a famous, or should I say infamous, combo because Mikaeus the Unhallowed and Triskelion, well, just win you the game essentially on the spot. Mikaeus has other non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Undying. And Triskelion enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and by removing a counter from it, you can ping any target for 1. Basically, you use Triskelion to ping your opponents, as well as itself to take itself out. Thanks to Mikaeus, Triskelion has Undying, and because it had no counters on it when it died, it comes right back into play with another counter on it, plus the 3 that it enters with too. So you just keep pinging your opponents, pinging itself, taking itself out, bringing it back out, and you win. And of course, you can make this combo work very quickly by getting these into your graveyard with your commander and then casting something like Victimize. So with Victimize, you basically sacrifice your commander to get each of these creatures in play, and you combo and win. Again, Old Stick Fingers is kind of like a Buried Alive or Entomb that you always are going to have in your command zone. So you can set yourself up to win very quickly. Now, obviously, your build with this commander does not have to be focused on a combo. Another build idea might be focusing on getting a lot of creatures into your graveyard, and especially ones that actually want to be there with things like Filth and Golgari Grave Troll. Phil says as long as it's in your graveyard and you control a swamp, creatures you control have Swamp Walk. So your opponents might be in big trouble if Stick Fingers gets huge, which it definitely can, and it's got Swamp Walk, and if they have a swamp, well, swing through and have fun. And then Golgari Grave Troll has Dredge 6, so basically instead of drawing a card, you can put this into your hand and get 6 cards milled into your graveyard. So yeah, mill yourself even further, get more creatures in your graveyard, and have fun. And especially have fun with something like Spider Spawning. It's going to give you a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach for each creature card in your graveyard, and it's got flashback for a 6 in the black. So yeah, there are a lot of different builds that you can have around this commander, and yes, this definitely has the potential to be a very broken commander with the right build too. Regardless, although Old Stick Fingers might have the #1 name in this set, it is the number 8 in the Golden Pig Awards. But now it's time for us to move away from that amazing name and on to number 7. And at 7th place, we've got yet another incredibly powerful commander with a unique design with Leer, Disciple of the Drowned. Leer is a 3/4 human wizard that costs 3 blue. And he has spells can't be countered. Yeah, that's kind of a strange thing to see on a mono blue commander. Typically, mono blue players like to be able to counter spells, and now you can't. Obviously, the reverse is true though, and now your spells can't be countered as well. And oh, are you going to be casting quite a few spells, because it says each instant sorcery card in your graveyard has flashback. The flashback cost is equal to that card's mana cost. So yeah, like Old Stick Fingers, Leer can most definitely be built in an incredibly powerful and even broken way. And though I said you can't counter spells, technically that is true, but there are certain ways around that. Like, something like Narset's Reversal. It says, copy target instant or sorcery spell, then return to its owner's hand. You may choose new targets for the copy. So technically you aren't countering the spell, you're just bouncing it back to their hand. And yeah, of course, when you do that, you're getting a copy of it too. So even though your opponents think their spells might be safe because they can't be countered, well, if they cast an instant or sorcery, you could just bounce it back with this. Or, you can just bounce your own spell back to your hand and copy it, and with something like High Tide, that can be pretty absurd. It says until end of turn, whenever a player taps an island for mana, that player adds blue to their mana pool, and yes, High Tide stacks. So if you cast this multiple times in a turn, which again your commander most definitely allows, your islands are going to be tapping for an absurd amount. And of course, you don't even have to flash it back just yet, because you can utilize something like Call to Mind to get it back and cast it again. Call to Mind says return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand, and again, you can flash back any of these cards because of your commander. So just keep casting your High Tide over and over again, and maybe untap some lands with something like Frantic Search. It's going to have you draw 2, then discard 2, and untap up to 3 lands, and again, those 3 lands very well might be tapping for 5 mana each at this point. Or, you could just cast or copy or, recast Time Stretch a couple of times. It says target player takes 2 extra turns after this one. So yeah, extra turn spells that don't exile themselves are going to be incredibly powerful in this kind of a deck. And of course, you can utilize something like Increasing Confusion to either win the game or to help give you access to a ton of cards. It's going to make target player mill X cards, but if it's cast from your graveyard, you mill twice X. So if you mill yourself again because your cards have flashback, you're getting access to essentially all the cards in your graveyard that are instants and sorceries. Yeah, there are a lot of unique and interesting and of course very powerful things that you can do with Leer. And again, thanks to that first part, this is a mono blue commander that doesn't want to counter spells. So it definitely does things that blue mages want to do, but also very much not things that blue mages want to do. Regardless, Leer, Disciple of the Drowned, you have finished at number 7. So now let's move from that 7 spot on to number 6. And coming in at 6th place, we've got Jaren, Corrupted Bishop / Ormondal the Corruptor. This is a transform commander, and there's quite a bit going on with it, so here we go. Jaren is a 2/3 human cleric for 2 and a black, and when it enters the battlefield or whenever another human you control dies, you lose 1 life and get a 1/1 white human creature token. By paying 2, target human you control gains lifelink until end of turn. But here's the exciting part. At the beginning of your end step, if you have exactly 13 life, you may pay 4 black, and if you do, transform Jaren. And Jaren, of course, transforms into Ormondal the Corruptor. Ormondal is a 6/6 demon with flying, trample, and lifelink, and sacrifice another creature, draw a card. So the backside of this card is a very powerful demon that is an incredibly powerful free sacrifice outlet that generates you an absurd amount of value when you're set up properly. And of course, keep in mind that throughout the game, Jaren can actually help set you up by making you a lot of tokens. Regardless, I just love the uniqueness of that transform trigger having to get to exactly 13 life. Obviously, Jaren can help you get there by helping you lose life or gain life with lifelink, but there are some other ways that can be a bit quicker and a bit more efficient. So with this commander, you can utilize cards like Mischievous Poltergeist, Blood Celebrant, and Plague of Vermin to set your life total. Mischievous Poltergeist is just a 1/1 spirit with flying that says pay 1 life regenerated. So you can freely activate this as many times as you need to get exactly to 13 life. And while doing so, again, it protects itself because of that regeneration. Another way to do this is with Blood Celebrant, which has pay a black, pay 1 life, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Now this one might not be as obvious, but basically, yes, just pay a black, pay 1 life, and then add a black mana to your mana pool, to then pay a black, pay 1 life, add a black mana to your mana pool. So you're essentially just spinning your wheels and losing life, but again, that's the point, so just get to exactly 13 life and have fun. But the most powerful of these setups has got to be Plague of Vermin. It says, starting with you, each player may pay any amount of life. Repeat this process until no one pays life. Each player puts a 1/1 black rat creature token into play for each 1 life they paid this way. So pay whatever the difference between your life total is and 13, and have fun dropping down to 13 life, getting a ton of rats, and yeah, utilizing them for your sack outlet. If set up properly, you can easily win the game on the spot with this by just casting it, sacrificing a lot of rats, and getting a ton of value and winning. But outside of tokens, you can also utilize other forms of creature fodder like Reassembling Skeleton. It has pay 1 and a black, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So again, when the Ormondal side is up, this is basically pay 2 mana, draw a card. Next up, you can also drain your opponents out and win the game with something like Zulaport Cutthroat. It says whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And of course, you can draw even more cards with something like Smothering Abomination. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. Whenever you sacrifice a creature, draw a card. So now instead of Ormondal drawing you 1 card when you sacrifice a creature, you're getting 2. Yeah, when set up properly, you can easily transform Jaren into Ormondal, and when set up properly with that, you can also generate an absurd amount of value. Overall, I just really like the design, and again, that unique transformation requirement is something that I think is really cool. So Jaren, or should I really say Ormondal, congratulations on placing number 6. Next up though, we are moving on from number 6 and on to number 5. And coming in at 5th place, we've got Florian Valdarin Scion. Florian is a 3/3 Vampire Noble with first strike that costs 1 black-red. Florian has at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the total amount of life your opponents lost this turn. Exile one of those cards and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may play the exiled card this turn. So that's actually a really cool effect, and once you're set up properly, this can essentially be kind of like a mini tutor every single turn. Now, obviously, you can get a bunch of combat damage in, and then your post-combat main phase, you get to look at a lot of cards, but of course, there are ways to more consistently get even more damage in. For example, you can utilize things like Spear Spearer, Shepherd of Rot, and Sanctum of Stone Fangs. Spear Spearer is just a simple 1 mana defender, but it has tap, it deals 1 damage to each player. So for just 1 mana, this is a repeatable way to dig 3 deeper into your deck. Speaking of which, there's Shepherd of Rot, which has even more potential. It says tap, each player loses 1 life for each zombie on the battlefield. Obviously, if you're running other zombies than this one, this can increase, but also keep in mind, this counts any zombies your opponents have too. So if one of your friends is playing a zombie tribal deck, this can really get out of hand and help you dig to impossible levels in your deck. Now, obviously these 2 abilities hurt you as well, but that's okay, and also we've got other abilities that don't actually hurt you, like Sanctum of Stone Fangs. It says at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life for X number of shrines you control. Now, most likely this is probably going to be the only shrine in your deck, but still, that is basically, hey, everyone else loses a life, and I gain a life, and yeah, I dig 3 deeper. Next up, of course, we can utilize even bigger one-off effects with something like Price of Progress. It's going to deal damage to each player equal to twice the number of non-basic lands that player controls. So for just 2 mana, we can dig a lot into our deck, especially in combination with something like Dictate of the Twin Gods. It has flash, and it says if a source would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. So again, by doubling up our damage, we can dig twice as deep with things like Price of Progress and Spearer, and other things that dish out damage. And of course, we can actually get that trigger from our commander twice with something like Shrinic Resonator. It has pay 2, tap, copy target triggered ability you control, you may choose new targets for the copy. So yeah, have fun with those 2 mini tutors. Which again, might not be so many if you've got a lot of damage effects out there. Yeah, for a low-to-the-ground commander, I think this commander has a lot of potential, and I really like the design around it. So Florian Valderin Scion, congratulations at finishing 5th. But now it's time for us to move away from 5th place and onto number 4. And coming in at 4th place, we've got Vadric Astral Archmage. Vadric is a 1/2 human wizard that costs 1 blue-red. It has, if it's neither day nor night, it becomes day as Vadric Astral Archmage enters the battlefield. And instant and sorcery spells you cast cost X less to cast for X is Vadric's power. On top of that, whenever day becomes night or night becomes day, put a ++1 counter on Vadric. So obviously, Vadric's power can slowly increase on its own throughout the game when it switches from day to night and night to day. But Vadric cares about his overall power, not just how many counters are on him, so we've got plenty of other ways to pump him and do some incredibly powerful and absurd things. So even just slapping a Blackblade Reforged on this commander, even though it's not a Voltron commander, can be an incredible play. It's going to give equipped creature +1/+1 for each land you control. So yeah, again, for every single land we control, our commander is going to grow in power, and our spells are going to cost less for every single land we've got. And of course, we can double up our commander's power with things like Unleash Fury and Enrage. Unleash Fury for just 1 mana with this deck, again, because our commander is going to reduce that cost, says double the power of target creature until end of turn. So if, say, Vadric's got 5 power, now it's doubled to 10 for just 1 mana, and now we can just reduce the cost of all of our instant sorceries by 10. So, you know, then we can cast another spell like Enrage for just 1 mana, but X would be 10. So then Vadric gets +10/+0 until end of turn, again, basically doubling its power. And then all of our instants and sorceries are reduced by 20. So yeah, you can see how this is going to get out of control very quickly, especially if you throw something like Brass's Bounty in there. This says for each land you control, create a treasure token, and again, you basically just cast this for a red. So now we've got more free mana that we can just utilize on more spells like, you know, Stroke of Genius. That says target player draws X cards and it costs X2 and a blue. Or again, for this deck's purposes, just a blue. Essentially, for just a blue mana, we're going to be drawing cards equal to our commander's power -2. So we can draw into even more pump spells to make things even more ridiculous. And of course, we can actually make someone draw out with a spell like this, or with Explosion, which is going to deal X damage to any target and make target player draw X cards. So that can actually take out 2 players with damage, and with milling, or, you know, if we want to draw the cards ourselves and we're not going to mill ourselves, do that. Yeah, there are a lot of ways to have some really incredible turns with this commander, and I just really like the way that it's designed. This commander can, of course, grow throughout the game with that night and day change, but of course you can speed up the process just a tad. So again, Vadric, congratulations on your number 4 finish. But now moving away from number 4, we have made it into our top 3. And coming in at 3rd place, we've got Eloise Nephalia Sleuth. Eloise is a 4/4 human rogue that costs 3 blue-black. She has, whenever the creature you control dies, investigate. So by doing that, you create a colorless clue artifact token with pay 2, sacrifice this artifact, draw a card. And on top of that, whenever you sacrifice a token, surveil 1. So there are actually a lot of reasons why I really like the design of this commander. First off, they didn't unnecessarily limit her with her abilities. Mainly, they could have said whenever another non-token creature you control dies. But they didn't limit that, and this gives this commander a lot more potential. And in fact, there are a lot of really cool things that you can do with this commander, and you can build this deck in a lot of different ways. Personally, I would make an artifact-centric deck looking to get out a lot of artifact creature tokens, sacrificing those for value, and getting even more artifacts in play with this. Again, this commander could have been limited even more, saying whenever you sacrifice a token could have easily been whenever you sacrifice a clue. But they didn't limit that, and because of that, you can gain a lot of value by just making creature tokens and sacrificing those too. So some cards that I would definitely consider in my build would be cards like Genesis Chamber, Tamiyo's Journal, and Academy Manufacturer. Genesis Chamber says, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, if Genesis Chamber is untapped, that creature's controller creates a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token. Basically, when we have any non-token creature come into play, we're going to be getting artifact tokens on top of that. And again, if we got ways to sacrifice them, we get even more value. And speaking of value in sacrificing, there's Tamiyo's Journal. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, investigate, but more importantly, it says tap, sacrifice 3 clues, search your library for a card and put that card in your hand, then shuffle your library. For this deck's purposes, this is a repeatable tutor essentially every turn after we're set up properly. And then Academy Manufacturer can provide us an absurd amount of value as well. It says if you create a clue, food, or treasure token, instead create one of each. So now instead of just getting one token with that clue, we also get a food token and a treasure token on top of that. So yeah, that can get out of hand really quickly. And speaking of getting out of hand, I would also utilize things like Blinkmoth Urn, Clock of Omens, and Shimmer Dragon to take advantage of all the artifacts we're going to have in play. Blinkmoth Urn says at the beginning of each player's pre-combat main phase, if it's untapped, that player adds colors for each artifact they control. So this can give us an absurd amount of mana during our turn. But we can also deny our opponents of that mana and actually those mirror tokens as well with things like Clock of Omens and Shimmer Dragon. Clock of Omens says tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, untap target artifact. So now we can utilize all of our artifacts, including all those clue tokens that we're going to be making, to untap our mana rocks for even more mana. Or, untap Tamiyo's Journal to tutor again. And then Shimmer Dragon says, as long as you control 4 or more artifacts that has hexproof, and tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, draw a card. So for this deck's purposes, this is a massive draw engine that is protected thanks to that hexproof. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool things that you can do this commander, and again, I am just really happy that they didn't limit this commander in any unnecessary ways. So because of that, Eloise, you have finished number 3. And now it's time to continue in the top 3 by moving on to number 2. And finishing in second place, we've got Lind, Cheerful Tormentor. Lind is a 2/4 human warlock with Death Touch that costs 1 blue, black, red. She has, whenever a curse is put in your graveyard from the battlefield, return to the battlefield attached to you at the beginning of the next end step. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may attach a curse attached to you to one of your opponents. If you do, draw 2 cards. So it finally happened, we finally have a dedicated curse commander. And yes, I know there are other commanders out there like Gen that can do curses, but this one actually mentions them and does specific things with them, so yeah, really exciting for players who like curses. But this commander is kind of like an interesting risk-reward with curses. The major downside to curses is that if you stack a lot of curses onto one player and they lose the game, well, you did your job and those curses did great, but you lose them. But with Lind, you're getting those curses back automatically at the beginning of the next end step. But again, it's not all upside because the curses come back, but they come back attached to you. So there is a trade-off there. You don't lose them, but they can really hamper you. Or should I say, temporarily hamper you. Because again, at the beginning of your upkeep, you can attach a curse attached to you to one of your opponents, and if you do, you draw 2 cards. So in a way, you can kind of slowly move your curses away from you and onto other players, while also generating some card advantage for yourself as well to, dig for more curses to put on those players. Again, I really like the push and pull of this commander. There is a trade-off for that kind of power. So of course, a deck built around this is going to want to utilize a lot of curses, like, Curse of Misfortunes, which gets more curses. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library for a curse card that doesn't have the same name as a curse attached to enchanted player, put it on the battlefield attached to that player, then shuffle your library. Now, obviously, you've got a lot of fantastic curses to pick from, like some fantastic older ones like Curse of Opulence, and a newer one like Curse of Unbinding. Curse of Opulence says, whenever enchanted players attack, create a colorless artifact token named Gold. It has sacrificed this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Each opponent attacking that player does the same. Basically, hey, attack that player, and we both get gold. And then Curse of Unbinding is a brand new curse. It says at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, that player reveals cards in the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield under your control. That player puts the rest of the revealed cards into their graveyard. So, free creatures for free? Who doesn't want that? But you can also do some really unique things with this commander as well, taking advantage of the fact that those enchantments are going to be coming back into play. For example, this kind of a commander can really utilize a card like Claws of Gix. It's a 0 mana artifact that has pay 1, sacrifice a permanent, you gain 1 life. So when those curses get attached back to you after that player loses the game, well, you can actually just temporarily get rid of them. Again, they're going to come back into play, but you can temporarily get rid of whatever the curse's downside is. And you can also take advantage of all these curses leaving the battlefield and coming back into play with things like Doomwake Giant and Thought Trender Lamia. Doomwake Giant has Consolation. Whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 till end of turn. So in this deck, this can essentially be a repeatable board wipe. And speaking of wipes, Thought Trainer Lamia has Consolation. Whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent discards a card. So you can essentially just wipe out your opponent's hands over and over again. Again, this commander has a lot of potential, and again, I really like the upside, but the downside, but also ways to mitigate that downside too. And actually, on top of all this, there's a really cool lore inclusion in this art as well. If you haven't seen my episode on that, make sure you check this out. But of course, not until you stick around for number 1. And the winner of the Innistrad Midnight Hunt Golden Pig Awards for both the main set as well as the precons is Tovalar Dire Overlord / Tovalar the Midnight Scourge. Tovalar Dire Overlord is a 3/3 human werewolf that costs 1 red-green. He has whenever a wolf or werewolf you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more wolves and or werewolves, it becomes night, then transform any number of human werewolves you control. And obviously, since it's a day-night card, it's got daybound, and on the backside, we've got Tovalar the Midnight Scourge. It says, whenever a wolf or werewolf you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, so same as the front. What's different though is by paying X red-green, target wolf or werewolf you control gets +X/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. And I probably should have mentioned that this is the Nightbound side, and it is a 4/4. Regardless, there is a lot going on here, but all of it is fantastic for Werewolf Tribal fans out there. Werewolf Tribal fans out there have been waiting a long time for a Werewolf Tribal commander option, and this one pretty much blew the expectations out of the water. Both the front and the backside can provide you an absurd amount of card advantage throughout the game. It's essentially a coastal piracy or reconnaissance mission on a commander, again a specific tribe, but still. On top of that, this can transform your werewolves itself. And on top of all that, you essentially get a Kessig Wolf Run type effect on the backside too. So yeah, what's not to love about this Werewolf Tribal commander? Of course, you can utilize all of your werewolf cards that you know and love with things like Full Moon's Rise, Silver Partisan, and Cult of the Waxing Moon. Full Moon's Rise says werewolf creatures you control get +1/+0 and have trample, and then you can also sacrifice it to regenerate all your werewolves. So you can use this to pump your creatures, get damage through, and also protect them as well. And then Silver for Partisan says whenever a wolf or werewolf you control becomes the target of an instant or sorcery spell, put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield. So even if your opponents do target your wolves or werewolves, you're going to be getting a lot more of them. And speaking of getting more of them, how about Cult of the Waxing Moon? It says whenever a permanent you control transforms into a non-human creature, put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield. So now whenever your humans turn into werewolves, you're going to be getting a ton of wolves as well. Also, obviously, there are some fantastic werewolves out there as well, like Crew and Outlaw and Sage of Ancient Lore. One transforms into Terror of Crew and Pass, and the other transforms into Werewolf of Ancient Hunger. Terror of Crew and Pass has double strike, and it says each werewolf you control can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. So you can hit harder and get a lot of damage through thanks to this. And then Werewolf of Ancient Hunger has Vigilance and Trample, and its power and toughness are each equal to the total number of cards in all players' hands. So yeah, this is going to be a heavy hitter to say the least. And you know what? If you want to keep your werewolves as werewolves, which is their most powerful side, you're going to want Immerwolf in play. It says other wolf and werewolf creatures you control get +1/+1, and non-human werewolves you control can't transform. So essentially your werewolves are stuck as werewolves, and you're going to love that. Regardless, obviously there are a lot of fantastic werewolves and werewolf tribal cards out there, and they were just waiting for a commander for the deck to actually work. And what a commander they got finally with Tovalar Dire Overlord. So because of that, congratulations Tovalar Dire Overlord / Tovalar the Midnight Scourge. You are truly the golden pig of Innistrad Midnight Hunt. So Tovalar, make sure you're looking out for that golden pig trophy in the mail. Just try not to eat it. I don't know, do werewolves eat pigs? Probably. I don't know. It's made of gold, okay? Again, a big thank you out there to all the commanders that competed for this prestigious award. Unfortunately, there could only be one golden pig of Innistrad Midnight Hunt. But luckily, or should I say unluckily for the commanders that were not mentioned in this award, there's still one more award that is up for grabs. So make sure you're on the lookout for the next award ceremony with the Golden Toilet of Innistrad Midnight Hunt. Who will win this other not so prestigious award? Well, tune in to find out. But until then, as always, thanks again and have a good one.